This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 3 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I'm your host, Gordon MacLelland. I'm delighted to be joined today by Leinster Rugby senior coach and former England head coach, Stuart Lancaster. Stuart, thank you for joining us on the show.
No problem, Gordon. Nice to be on.
Stuart, fantastic to have you on the show. And of course, what I didn't expect as we planned the date for this recording was the breaking news of today. So maybe you can give our listeners a snapshot into the last 24 hours and where you're heading at the end of this season.
Yeah, no, it's been a busy 24 hours. So I flew back from Leeds to Dublin late last night, and today was the announcement that I was leaving Leinster at the end of the year to take a position as head coach of Racing 92 from July 2023. So obviously, you know, there was various stakeholders I needed to tell, and the players, obviously, and then a big press conference that I've just finished. So yeah, it's hot off the press today. But hopefully now it's put to bed and we can concentrate back on getting ready for Ulster this Friday. And obviously a big season ahead. You know, it's quite unique to have something announced so early, particularly with the latest next season. But Racing 92 had a restructuring prepared in their minds, so they actively looked for a head coach early, and obviously came and asked me. So it was a tough decision because Leinster's a great place, but you know, one that's hard to turn down also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a great place, Leinster. I absolutely love coming over there to do bits and pieces as well. So that'll now be your third country you'll be going into to do coaching. Obviously, time in England, time in Ireland now, and over to France. What are your greatest memories of your career to date of being involved in professional sport when you sort of roll back the years a little bit and have a chance to reflect?
I've got many. I mean, many. Like, if you go back through my career, originally it was a teaching career. You know, the game went professional in '95, and then I started coaching Leeds Academy in the year 2000 and did that job for 5 years. So I've got amazing memories from that time. You know, games we won, players that developed during that window, success we had, the evolution of the academy to become the number one in the country, and then leading into the championship with Leeds and into the Premiership. And then took on the head of elite player development job with England, the academy's role, the Saxons role, again, experiences there, getting out to the World Cup in 2011 and obviously ultimately taking the England job. So there's probably too many to mention. Like I say, when you read it out, it's actually quite a broad perspective now I've had of coaching. And it's not just in different countries, it's at every age of the game, you know. So from my son's under 6 team when they were in sixes, you know, probably coached at every level now, and as you say, in different countries as well, which has been brilliant. Yeah,
I think as you say, different countries and different age groups. I think particularly if we've got education backgrounds as well is really exciting because you get to almost chart the journey of everybody's sort of sporting career as well, and obviously you've got Dan there who we'll come on to later, who's playing some rugby himself at the moment as well. I want to take you back to those early days because I remember you doing some work around our book around being a parent coach, which was incredibly helpful. I want to take you back to when Dan started playing and did his mini rugby. What are your memories of that time? How do you remember that and what it was like sort of taking on that role, bearing in mind you had a bit of a name in the game at that stage as well?
Yeah, well, it was Sophie as well. So Sophie played in the girls team. Well, she played as a girl in the boys team, so she was a year older. So yeah, it was both age groups really. But yeah, I was in the Premiership at the time, so you know, I was coaching Leeds. So it was a reasonably high profile job at the time. But they were 600, 700 rates, and I was never the sort of lead coach of the age grade teams that they played through. There was always a couple of lead coaches who sort of led the programs, and I just sort of would sit in the background and try and help and advise and steer them, really. I saw my role as trying to develop the parents to become better coaches themselves, because most of the parents, or very few of the parents, were actually coaches or teachers. You know, most of them were from business or industry or whatever, and they were just wanting to help out as parents do. So I saw my role as trying to help them become better at teaching from tag to contact, or how to catch and pass the ball, or how to develop, defensive organization, or good running lines, or whatever. So, but every Sunday there was either a training session or a home game and away game, and your weekend was built around it. And the players, like my son and his mates, are still his best mates now, really, the lads he played with. And the parents become friends with the parents as well. So you go through this sort of real journey together between the ages of sort of under 60s all the way through to, well, it was under 16 with this team. Then it sort of broke up a little bit. But it was a very enjoyable time.
Yeah, and I know you spent quite a lot of time, as you say, supporting parents back then, which is obviously the sort of work we do now. What can you remember from that time in terms of maybe the way parents were viewing their kids' sport? As you say, many of them don't have coaching, sports science backgrounds, so they're very much turning up with the lens of, maybe this is how sport is in the media, or what I watch on the TV, and maybe this is how I should be supporting. What can you remember from back then, and the support that you felt they needed more than anything else?
I think they were all very open-minded and hungry to learn, for sure. So often I found with the parents that they benefited from time away from the kids where I could actually give them ideas on their own. So I'd have a little parents workshop where I could teach them the basics of skills and drills, or organization of sessions, or like I created a coach the coaches pack, which was really very useful for the players, for the parents, because it gave them the basis of what you get taught as a teacher: how to organize a session, how to run a session, how to communicate, how to gain the players' attention, where to position yourself, how to create challenging sessions without making them too challenging that the players lose interest because it's too hard, how to differentiate. So all those things, I'll try and pass on what I'd learned. As by this time, this was 8-9 years as a teacher and 4 or 5 years as an academy manager.
Yeah.
And I found the parents were very open-minded and keen to want to do a good job. How to speak to the children before, during, and after sessions, how to motivate, how to hit the balance between development and enjoyment. 101 things really. And we obviously, you learn as you go as well, with the wins and the losses, and the selection decisions you have to make, and the cup games you're trying to win, or does it really matter if you win, or the whole balance of enjoyment versus competitive sport in that age range is difficult to hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the one thing we've certainly found, and even most recently in Singapore, where I felt that there may have been a challenge landing some messages just because of the differences in culture and some of the sort of attitudes that maybe people have over there towards education and coaching. But actually, I do feel often that parents, a lot of the time, are willing to engage and actually are really hungry to at least take on some new ideas. They're never going to agree with absolutely everything, but they at least want to try and learn a little bit more in best supporting their kids. Do you think we maybe miss a trick a little bit in terms of trying to bring parents into it a little bit earlier? Right? I know some coaches are really fearful of it because I think they feel that if they open the door to these types of conversation, that maybe then parents are sort of going to trample all over it and take over, particularly in our sort of junior sports clubs and those who maybe aren't professional coaches.
Yeah, I'd say they're few and far between, those types of parents, in my experience. Most of them recognize they're not an expert in the field, and most of them want to just do a good job for their kids and the kids who play in the team. So they take it seriously, they enjoy it. I think the trick we miss is that we don't give them more support earlier. We just need to, if I could wave a magic wand, I would have like a North of England parents workshop for mini rugby. And let's get a massive amphitheatre that could fit 500 people in. And in one go, try and at least give them fundamentals of the challenges. As it happens, the best you can do usually is within your own club or your own environment. But, I think the earlier we engage with the parents, the more successful the program tends to become, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think then you very much sort of setting the tone for the journey then, and obviously things change as the children get older and different sort of levels of development. But I think, you know, parents who have no info, and in some environments get given really very little information, end up guessing, end up asking somebody next to them who equally doesn't know as much, and then they go and find something on the internet which isn't in the right context, and then they try to apply that, and it's it's hard to watch. And as I say, they're definitely very grateful when somebody tries to make sense of what is. It's quite a tough role being a sports parent. I mean, how did you? I mean, you obviously had the experience of being in sport. How did you find it with Dan and Sophie, particularly as they sort of got that little bit older? Were you able to sort of use what you knew and manage to sort of distance yourself? Or what were the sort of challenges?
No, I would be able to sort of, you know, take it for what it was and help out where I could without being too emotionally attached to it all. You know, obviously, I was emotionally attached to coaching England at the time, so that was probably taking a fair chunk of my emotional attachment. But equally, I cared about wanting them to have a good experience and wanting to do a good job. But it is a difficult job. It is a difficult job. And often I would joke and say, geez, you think this is how you want to try and coach our under-14 team at the moment, you know, as they're beginning to sort of find their own voice and exert their own influence on the team as a young group of, you know, growing up teenagers. So that combined with, as I say, selection decisions and trying to create opportunities for people, but hitting that sweet spot between development and winning, you know, games, which people, that's part of the reason why they play sport. So it is a difficult job, but I think the more we can do to help the parents, the more successful the program becomes, in my opinion. Let's say, so a connected, joined up program where the parents are supported and developed, and because ultimately you need them. You can't build a community rugby club or a community football club without the support of parents.
No, absolutely. They're as you said, they're absolutely integral to, certainly on the ground, to a lot of the great things that we see in local communities. Now, obviously, when you were, you spent time away with England, and you're obviously very busy with your own working life. Did that mean that Nina had to take on the role as a sports parent? Did you have to get the reports back from her? Were they accurate reports back, or might have they been slightly different to what Stuart would have watched?
No. Should be. I mean, she was a PE teacher as well, you see, so we'd very much be on the same page. And I think, like, when I look at the teams around, or the teams who played, generally they were all pretty good in Yorkshire, certainly where we were. You know, there were good coaches trying to do the right thing in the right way. Occasionally you get the other enthusiastic parent on the sideline, you know, shouting either A, at their own player, B, the opposition players, or C, the referee, who's usually a parent anyway. Yeah. So you would get that on occasions, but generally people would respect the fact that it's not professional. You know, it's there for fun, and we're there to help him develop. There's a good book, Finding the Champion in Your Child, which was, I would pass on to the parents, and that was one which was a really good way to get the parents to understand about how to ask good questions about how their training session went. And I would also try and get the parents to, I'll give the kids homework, the kids homework, and I get the parents to understand and bring them in and explain why I've set the homework. So the homework might be, I want you to practice passing the ball and show the parents the correct technique for passing and catching the rugby ball. So they then, because you're only with them for 2 hours on a Sunday morning, but they needed more support. The parents could give that if they knew what they were supporting with. So, that was all part of what's on my role as, because, you know, I was clearly the one with the most experience in the group. So there were plenty of parents, though, particularly in Dan's team, who played a decent level of rugby themselves. So it was more just adapting what they'd learned as players and translating that so they could become effective coaches.
Yeah, I think the homework one, again, is a vitally important one. We've just released a new range of books for young children to sort of do things in the garden with mum and dad across different sports, and looking at stuff, which I think is a a really positive thing. And then I was just smiling there, Stuart, when you said that, because I was thinking of the number of young players in that 7 to 13 age group who arrived with the reverse spin pass off the wrong hand that they'd been taught by Dad in the garden from the sort of 1960s version of the game. So I was sort of smiling away to myself there and unraveling that. No, I mean, it's obviously great that, again, you know, Nina's got that background as well. It's quite entertaining in our house, because when my wife goes off to watch something and I ask, well, how did it go and how did they do? And my wife will give me a response. And even my older son's now got to the stage where he'll say, yeah, and that's a Joe version of events as opposed to the proper one, particularly when it comes to his younger sister and he's actually watching as well. Although I do think he's a little bit more brutal than he needs to be with his younger sister, to be fair. Now, how was it with, obviously, Dan, obviously Sophie slightly older than Dan. Did you have a slightly different approach with Sophie as you did with Dan? Because I know I'm different with my daughter than I am with my son in terms of maybe how I sort of taught to them some of the bits that we go about. Were you any different with it being sort of daddy's daughter or anything like that?
No, I mean, not really. They were born like a year apart, so they're actually closer to being twins than they are being, like, you know, quite a big age gap between them. And one thing, you know, I've talked a lot about the rugby coaching side of things, but it wasn't the only sport they played. In fact, they played multi-sports, and that was a big thing that we wanted to encourage them. So whether it was tennis, cricket, badminton, basketball, swimming, gymnastics, you know, we did the full spectrum, really. And Sophie got the same diet as Dan. You know, it wasn't like we reduced Sophie's or we gave her different sports to follow. They both tended to go to the same clubs, and, you know, and as a consequence, you know, they've both developed into well-rounded sportsmen and women. You know, Dan's obviously gone down the rugby route now, but if you said, you know, is he a good tennis player? You'd say yes. If he's a good cricketer, yes. Is he a good basketball player? Yes. Is he good, you know, at golf? He's learning golf now, you know, as he's got into his early 20s. Yeah. And Sophie did the same. You know, she played England rounders. She played netball at school. She played hockey at school. She could have played cricket for sure. Rugby, obviously, she played. Football, she played at school. So yeah, both of them got the same experiences, really, you know. And I think definitely for Sophie, that helped her develop the confidence and the hand-eye coordination and all the other skills that come with doing multi-sports, to go into secondary school and enjoy that experience.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the whole, you know, specialization piece, multi-sport piece. I mean, I know where I stand. I'm very much like you. They've done lots of different, you know, sports, and you give them that opportunity. How do you think we can do more to convince parents that it's not necessarily the best thing just to be all in on one sport and expect some kind of return, as opposed to understanding that it's such a long process and that they will benefit from, you know, the different environments, the different movements, the different skills, the different groups that they'll be involved in? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think the quoting people like me who say it's a good idea, because it is a good idea. That well-roundedness piece is really, really important in the development. And also, I guess if you looked at the top athletes and sportsmen and women in the world, I'd say they all have multi-sport backgrounds. Now, clearly, there's some sports that are early specialization, such as gymnastics, swimming, etc. But generally, the team sports and the racket sports, you know, you tend to benefit from having a multi-sport approach to them. Rugby, in particular, obviously, is a late specialization sport, but equally, you know, very few of our children are going to go on to become professional athletes. Most of them, we just want to give them a good diet so they enjoy enough so they have fit and healthy teenage years. And when they go off and they leave home, they've still got this interest in playing in sport and keeping involved, you know, in their 20s and in their 30s, as they get, you know, they go through the jobs and the mortgages and the lifestyle changes that happen in your 20s. You get married, but equally, that's all we wanted to give our our kids. We wanted to give them a broad spectrum so they can then pick and choose as they get older, the ones that they really enjoy the most, and they have an enjoyable life after they've left school.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's that expectation of what we're really expecting across sports, and actually we want children to be continuing in sport right into adulthood. And we know numbers are dropping rapidly around the world across sports. There's very few that are bucking the trend to that. Just going back to that, how many of your Leinster boys did a bit of Gaelic stuff? Were they involved in that as well? A lot of them growing up.
Yeah, I'd say probably half. I'd say. Yeah. Obviously, their diet of sport is different to what you'd have in England. So, I said the Gaelic hurling and the football would be two. There'd be less cricket, probably less racket sports, I'd say. Although paddle tennis is taking off over here now. But yeah, the two Gaelic football sports would be very strong, and you can see the lads who've played as well, because they've got the hand-eye coordination and they've got the aerial skills that you need in catching a ball above your head that are developed in both of those sports.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting, and obviously I do a bit of work in Ireland and in Gaelic sport as well. So I'm always fascinated to know how much crossover there was, because there is quite a bit of competition for young players in some of those environments. So,
yeah, I don't think there's much crossover, but if you're saying did a few of the rugby lads play Gaelic sport as well? Yes, they did, but they tend to go down their own paths when they get to sort of 14, 15. But it's a national sport, the Gaelic hurling and football, and the GAA who run a really, really good, actually, community-based development program for coaches and parents. Because it's an amateur sport and they generate income through the All Ireland hurling finals and football finals, there's a big revenue comes in that they distribute really well to grassroots sport, and that's one of the reasons why Ireland is so successful given the small population.
Yeah, I mean, huge communities involved in that. I was absolutely staggered when somebody was telling me the size of the sort of smaller clubs on the ground. They're absolutely huge. I mean, they're certainly not small.
Well, we're on a 12-county tour in Leinster. Some of the facilities they've got would far and exceed what an equivalent club in England had.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible world, and it's a good one to learn some different bits and pieces about. I was just thinking about something earlier, just that you mentioned there, Stuart, about children continuing in sport, and something I was talking to Danny Kerry about on a podcast before this, and we were talking about some of those sort of character life skills building that we get through sport and going through the journey, some of those traits, the commitment, resilience, determination, self-organization, good communicators, adaptable people, all those things that benefit them. And Danny was saying, some of the athletes he got maybe were lacking in some of those skills, struggled to then make that step up when everybody was good, when they hit a certain level, and found it more difficult. And I was just working on a piece today around entitlement and opportunity, and it seems to be a word that has cropped up an awful lot when I've been out and about recently, this entitlement piece. And when you talk to parents, no parents wants an entitled kid, even if they don't know what those behaviors may look like. Coaches certainly don't want entitled athletes, yet the word seems to be cropping up a bit. And I was thinking about the public schools over here this afternoon, and a lot of the children who get given an awful lot of opportunity early on, get a lot of things done for them, do really, really well. And then they leave school, and then the reality of the adult world is very different. You go from the best facilities, some really good coach and everything done for you, and you end up in League Six playing your trade and working your way back up, where all of those things suddenly disappear. And I've spoken to a number of athletes recently who've just said, "Oh, actually, do you know what? It's too hard to work now. Now that it's not close by, I want to go and do something else." What are your thoughts on all of that sort of life skill development, entitlement? Where do you see it at the moment with young people?
Yeah, I've not really come across entitlement piece in the way you described it, but I understand the point you're making about the post-18 transition, particularly from school to university or school to work, is the biggest black hole really in sport, and how you bridge that gap and how you get around that without people dropping out the sport because of, like I say, whether you be at a good club or you're at a good school, you usually got it handed on a plate to you in that you've got good people who are keen, enthusiastic to run teams and to give you opportunities and help coordinate, the teams or the training or whatever. At 18, as you say, you either go to a apprenticeship, you go to a job, or you go to university. And in all three areas, I think there's a lot more work that could be done in helping universities, for example, or clubs really have excellent provision in terms of like facilities, equipment, coaching, the environment, the sense of connection. I think people grow through their teenage years having a real strong connection with their club team, like Dan's West Park Leeds team. He had a really strong affinity with. And then he went through various different rugby clubs because there was no academy in Yorkshire at the time. And he didn't have the same connection because he hadn't played, he hadn't worn the shirt together. He wasn't with his mates, he was with a group of strangers, really. But it's the same when you go to university. So you've got to develop that sense of identity very quickly and that sense of belonging and that purpose. And I don't think that transition's managed well at all. And I do think, as you say, nowadays, the kids who are finishing, they've got a lot of choice. They don't have to choose to do sport at university or choose to go to a club to continue their sport post-18. They can choose to sit and be on the phone or be on the PlayStation or go to the pub or go to the cinema or whatever. So we have to bridge that gap with good coaching, good organisation, so everyone gets opportunity rather than just the chosen few. My experience of going to university was the same. I'd played like North of England under-18s rugby, reasonably successful at school, captain of the school team, etc. Went to university. I think 280 people turned up for the rugby trials. I was in the third team. That was it. Now, most people in that third team dropped out within 3 weeks. But because I was a bit more determined, I basically contacted Wakefield, who were the best club in Yorkshire at the time. I thought, right, I'm going to go there because I want to try and be the best I can be. But I was the exception rather than the rule, really.
Yeah, as I say, they were just a sort of few thoughts off the top of my head when I was sort of thinking about that. And you're right. And Paul Grayson, who I was having coffee with earlier this week, who lives in the same village. It's amazing that you have Paul here, and he was saying that working at Durham University, a few years ago, before they upgraded all their facilities, a lot of people were turning up to cricket programs, and they were like, well, what's this? Are these our facilities? Are these our nets? And they weren't interested because it was such a drop down from what they had previously been used to, either at school or some of the clubs that they were involved in, which very much backs up what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't think it's rocket science to really invest in those. It's not that expensive to invest in decent facilities, decent coach development pathways, to give them decent opportunity to continue. But if it's not comparable, then and the gap's too big, people will vote with the feet. So it's on us as practitioners to develop those, and particularly in that age bracket, particularly in that 16 to say 20, that's the real area I would be targeting, because I think a lot of good work gets done between 6 and 16.
Yeah.
But it's the 16 to 20 piece, and that's the bit you've got to capture, the kids at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely food for thought there, and then the other big dropout point is that sort of early teenage years things, isn't it? When they maybe start to have more of a choice in what they're doing rather than mum and dad driving it as much, and they begin to become teenagers is another crucial time. But I still think it's all about the people and the environment and almost the product.
You make it enjoyable and make people feel included and have a strong sense of identity and purpose with the group, and a strong sense of enjoyment and fun alongside working hard or enjoying the sport, then they should stay around, definitely.
Yeah. Now, last couple of questions, Stuart, for tonight. What would you like to see develop in the youth sports space over the next decade? You've obviously got a wealth of experience, and obviously you've been through the whole system with Dan and Sophie and going through those bits. What do you think we need to target over the next 10 years to just make sports environments the best that they possibly can be for young people?
Well, I would go back and re-establish the school sports coordinator network that was set up. My wife is a school sports coordinator, and that was such a good initiative that the government set up at the time. Then it got disbanded by the next government. And I always thought that was such a step backwards, because you had this network of clusters of primary schools getting linked together and supported by a school sports development officer, school sports coordinator. And they would then make sure those primary schools are all facilitated with good programs and good support and everything else. And so you had this network that covered the country, really. And then a new government came in and they decided, oh, well, we don't want to invest in that. That's the wrong way to invest any money in. I don't think it was that expensive, really, but I thought that was a massive step backwards, and they've never really recovered from that. So I'd like that to be set back up personally at primary school level. I personally would have, and maybe they do have these, so perhaps I'm speaking out of turn, but I would have North of England, Midlands, Southwest and London and the Southeast conferences that are designed to help parents and let's call them apprentice coaches or developing coaches to learn from people who've coached at the highest level in all the different sports, and about here are some great examples of drills or skills you can do. Here's some examples of techniques to get control of your session. Here's examples of where you can motivate. And I think if you had, that network where you feed into the Northern coordinator, and the Northern coordinator then distributes information through their, Lancashire, Yorkshire, Cheshire, Cumbria, Northumberland, Durham, etc. Then I think you've got some way of disseminating information down through the pyramid. But unless you've got that structure in place, you've got the likes of me who are enthusiastic, wanted to help out, but I'm only helping out, the parents of West Park Leeds Rugby Club.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've got so much more I could pass on to people, just from my own experiences of what I've learned in 30 years teaching and coaching in amateur, semi-professional, and professional sport.
Yeah, and I think that disseminating a bit is a real problem, because those structures you talk about would still be brilliant across lots of sports, networks, local competitions, people playing, good coaching, good facilities, information shared, collaboration with each other rather than, fighting against each other all the time. I think they'd work everywhere. But, as you say, getting any program, I think, sort of nationally or even in regions, appears to be a challenge for people or getting.
I think it is, but that's the only way to do it, is you develop your sporting system and then you feed information into the system, but you can't do it without having the system in the place in the first place. And that was the thing that frustrated me when they unpicked a lot of good work which had created a good system. Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely on the systems and people line, I think, here. Last question. This is an interesting one. This is for Dan and Sophie, for the day that they have their own children, and you're talking to them about really good advice for them being sports parents, because they may not, Dan may be different to you, Sophie may be different to you. They may get carried away with it all and not have your experience. You never know. What advice would you give to them with their own children about supporting them with the sport? I would say give your children a broad spectrum of sporting experiences. I would encourage them to not judge the outcome, as in did you win or lose, but how did you do in relation to last week? What goals can you set? How would you like to develop, going forward? I would want them to be in environments that make it fun for them. I'd want them to understand that part of the enjoyment for their children would be the changing room after the game and the burgers and chips that they have with the mates, and going and take them on a tour, or playing against different kinds of opposition, you know what I mean? And also not, whilst wanting to create a competitive element to the sport, not taking it too seriously so that the wins and the losses are so high and so low that it's not in perspective with what under 10s football, rugby, hockey should be. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes parents play their own childhood through their own child, and they're too competitive, and they want to win. They want the child to win at all costs, and that's not what sport's about at that age for me. So I think Sophie Dan, like we went to Club Lasanta in Lanzarote, and we actually stopped going when they were maybe 14 or 15. Anyway, this year they said, "Oh, can we go back?" So we're back going to Club Lasanta in Lanzarote at 22 because Sophie said she just got great memories as a kid, you know, and that wasn't just doing like the kids clubs, but it was doing the fit and fun show. You know what I mean? It was the experience and doing things together as a family. And not only that, making good friends that stick for life, and learning about resilience and leadership and communication and dealing with referees and all that sort of stuff. Those life skills that you learn on a sport environment often don't get taught anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. You've walked yourself into one final question because because this is something that I always have in all of my talks, is this idea that, you know, I would never go out into the world and say that winning in competition isn't important. I would always say it's part of it, and it's not the only success criteria when out and about. How do we get people to understand that it's still all right for there to be competition, it's still all right to love winning and take the setbacks of losing and everything else, but frame it in a way where it's the development of the individual that is sort of driving it rather than the outcome? What can we do?
Well, I'll give you so I was in charge of the international age group teams with England. So that was England 16s, England 17s, England 18s, England 20s. And we created a pyramid, very simple pyramid. And it was under 16s training to win. Under 17s learning how to win. So under 16s we didn't really mind too much if we won or lost. Under 17s learning to win. So yes, there's an element of winning, but we're still experimenting with the game, still trying to grow our attacking frameworks and our mindset really. Under 18s was competing to win, and under 20s was winning. Yeah, because we were trying to win the under 20 World Cup by that point. Yeah. So the sort of pyramid would slowly peak. I think it's the same in the age grade of children, you know. So, you know, with under 10s, it's not actually the World Cup final. You know, it's the enjoyment of the sport and the development of the individual without necessarily, you know, focusing on the result all the time. That said, you still want the competitive element. Yeah. But then your course, as you get closer and closer to adult rugby and adult sport, you will narrow it down, and that was the way we tried to do it. I think it's quite an effective way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think one that will be again requires the right people in those environments to effectively manage it, because it does work and people do understand it and people do buy into it. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us on the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazingly, today that you found the time of all days with your new job offer, and really appreciate you giving us the time, and we look forward to talking again sometime in the future.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.